At least 5 people were killed and another 40 were injured when a vehicle sped into a Christmas parade in Wisconsin on Sunday. To discuss this in more detail is U.S. correspondent Lisa Daftari joining us once again from Los Angeles. Lisa, please say a red SUV drove directly into the Waukesha Christmas parade located about 17 miles or just over 25K west of Milwaukee. What do we know at this point?
The suspect has been taken into custody this morning. We don't know much. We have just the storyline is horrific, right? It had been a few years since we had one of these car rammings during Christmas. We used to hear a lot about this during Christmas in Europe with extremists taking this opportunity as a very symbolic hit against Christianity, against Christmas, against Christians. And we saw a few of those episodes, but we haven't seen that for a while. And there is no confirmation yet that this is a hate crime or extremists, or we don't know the agenda yet or the motive. What we do know is that a 39-year-old was taken into custody and that there were 5 fatalities and over 40 people that were injured. This is horrific. People have their guards down. It's the holiday season, the beginning of the holiday season, where people are just, happy. We've had a pandemic for 2 years. People have not been able to go out and enjoy the holidays that, the way that we usually do. And for this to happen in a small town, again, with people having their guards down, being vulnerable and trying to just enjoy the holiday season, this is very, very horrific. Obviously, this is a very fluid story, so it will continue to develop and we'll know more about the suspect and the motive in the hours to come.
Yeah, we'll definitely keep an eye on this story. Lisa, the Attorney General for Texas, Ken Paxton, reacted to yet another migrant caravan headed for the U.S. border. Now, reports say local governments are unable to keep track of illegal immigrants who are crossing the border from a number of Central and South American countries.
Yeah, the sheer number is just too many. People are having, the border towns, I should say, and the border states are the ones who are expressing concern here because they cannot control the masses, the sheer number. And of course, the administration is sending out mixed messaging, right? So first they say don't come, then they want to try to control or curb the number of migrants coming in, and then it's just free for all. They're saying come on in. And then remember again, Hal, we cannot vet these individuals. There's no way to call, the local DMV in Honduras or Guatemala and ask about these individuals and who they were and whether they have a record or not. So we do have an issue of drugs coming in over the border. We have had a high of the number of overdoses in this country for the past couple of years. And it's not a coincidence, right? These are very, very, very addictive opioids that are coming in over the border. We have a problem with COVID, obviously. We cannot vet these individuals. Again, we're dealing in a time where people can't enter a restaurant without showing their vaccine passport. Here in Los Angeles, it's become that way. You can't enter a gym or a club or anything without showing your vaccine passport, and yet you have hundreds and thousands of individuals coming over. Obviously, the crowds are not 6 feet apart. They're not social distancing. They're not being obviously as careful as they can be because their only goal is to get over the border and to get into the United States. And I will add, we have the story on the Foreign Desk last week. This is from John Solomon of Just the News. This was a breaking story that showed the brochure that these migrants were getting when they're coming over the border. The kind of treatment that they're getting is like being on a celebrity cruise line. They get a pamphlet, they get instructions on how to evade the law, they get a free one-way ticket to the city of their choice. So they come in over the border and they say, well, I want to be in Beverly Hills. Well, they will get a ticket to Beverly Hills. They also get free stays at nice hotels like the Hyatt and the Marriott. And these are nonprofit organizations, American-based 501c3s that are funding these projects. So again, we are battling, this force that wants these individuals to come in over the border, not acknowledging the danger that it poses to all Americans. We'd all love to be gracious and lax about this, but the bottom line is that these facts exist, these dangers exist, and we shouldn't be looking the other way. So when states like Texas, New Mexico, and others are expressing concern, we ought to listen.
Vetting is key. You're absolutely right. Not only for people who've maybe had their COVID shots coming across the border, and by the way, we're using vaccine passports here in Alberta as well, in Canada, but how about potential, I know there might be a potential terrorist in the group as well who's not vetted properly, posing as a refugee coming across the border as an immigrant, as a migrant.
We've seen that. Yeah, absolutely, Hal. We've seen that. And it's so difficult, needle in a haystack. It's so difficult to pinpoint these individuals because there is no vetting going on, right? And there's no, obviously, no profiling going on. There's no vetting going on. There's no questioning. I mean, again, the sheer numbers are so difficult to absorb. So we're definitely not doing so in a mindful or, a careful way to see who these individuals are, what their backgrounds are, who they are. And the ones who are embedding themselves, as you said, they're professionals, right? So they would know exactly how to act and how to present themselves to get in over the border, perhaps even get a nice paycheck, right? We know that idea has been tossed around here at the White House, where these individuals might get up to $450,000 coming in over the border. It's horrific. The whole concept is so dangerous to society here, and in so many ways. But we have seen examples, as you said, how of dangerous elements coming in over the border and taking advantage of the fact that we're open and we're allowing these unvetted individuals to come over the border.
There's some serious tension developing between the United States and Israel right now. Lisa, there are some major differences between the two nations regarding nuclear talks with Iran. Now, these differences were aired recently during an international conference in Bahrain. Tell me more about that.
Right. How embarrassing, right? So, the bottom line, we're trying to get into an Iran nuclear deal in order to curb a regime that has poured billions of dollars into terrorism, into Hezbollah, into Hamas, into Al Qaeda's pockets. And therefore, why should any two democratic countries like Israel and the United States that have been allied for so many years be on different pages regarding how to curb a terrorist influence? We should follow Israel's lead on this, right? They're the ones who are in the neighborhood. They understand the threat of the Iranian regime. They're in direct way of their missiles, and of course, the Iranian regime has sworn to take Israel off the map. So, if I were in the White House, I'd say, let us know what the threats are, because you've kept an eye on the Iranian threat. But right now we have a different president administration in office who believes that appeasing a terrorist regime like the Iranian regime is number one. And that hasn't gotten us anywhere, right? So far, they've tried to get back into the Iran nuclear deal. That was the Obama era nuclear deal. And Iran has become increasingly bold to say, we're not going to change a thing. We're not going to back down from our missile program. We're not going to back down from uranium enrichment. We're not going to back down from the funding of terror. And obviously, Israel's not on board with having no conditions or minimal conditions. They're not on board with removing the sanctions before we see any behavioral change from the Iranian regime. And of course, this sounds like common sense to you and I, but the White House, it sounds like it might kind of, upset the deal. So we don't want that, right? That's why we'll see where this is going to go. Of course, we have November 29th in the books as the day in which we're going to go back to the negotiating table with the world powers, the United States and the Iranian regime, to see if they can carve out another Iran nuclear deal. Listen, the United States is roaring to go. They want this deal, and the Iranian regime knows that. That's not a good place to start your leveraging, but let's see how it goes.
Lisa, clashes broke out between Israeli security forces and Palestinians over the weekend as hundreds marched to honor a Hamas terrorist who allegedly killed an Israeli and wounded 4 others in Jerusalem's Old City.
Yeah, horrific story. Unfortunately, I'd have to say it's nothing new. This was in the Old City, if in the tunnels that lead up to the Western Wall. If you've been to Jerusalem, this is where every tourist walks, right? So I've been there dozens of times, and I know these tunnels very well, and I know these are like shops, old shops that people go to buy souvenirs and such. And the young man who's 25 years old and was killed recently moved to Israel from South Africa in order to live there and have a wonderful, rich experience. So he became a tour guide in the Old City and unfortunately was killed by a Hamas terrorist. Now, the headlines say that the Palestinians were marching in eastern Jerusalem, but what you're not reading is how they're passing around candy and sweets to celebrate the death. This is what the Western media does not understand. This is what so many people don't understand, is the mentality, the ideology of when someone is killed, an innocent young child that is 25 years old, has the rest of someone's life ahead of him, is killed, then they're passing around sweets. They're not mourning him. They're looking at the guy who killed him as a martyr. They're celebrating the death of another human being. And this is, this is the truth, and this is the daily ins and outs of living in Israel, living in Jerusalem. The same day there was a stabbing in Jaffa port, which is again another tourist area. These are innocent individuals. These are not soldiers. They're not equipped with weaponry. These are innocent people that are living their normal lives and are killed because of an ideology that says you must kill Jews. And they know it as a good deed. They know it as martyrdom to kill Jews. And this is a terror organization. We can circle back to the Iran story. The Iran regime is funding Hamas and these types of terrorist activities. They're pay to slay. They're paying the families of those who are willing to blow themselves up or die killing another a Jew. This is the reality of the situation. And I just want to paint, the macro of it. The micro of it is, unfortunately, another young person was killed. But the macro of it is this ideology is not going anywhere. And this is the daily reality for people who live in that region.
Yeah, very, very sad indeed. Lisa, U.S. intelligence agencies found evidence that construction work has begun on a secret Chinese military facility in the United Arab Emirates. What does that mean for us here in the West? Should we be concerned?
It means wake up. Yes, it means wake up. Exactly right. We should be concerned. Every day, we're at the foreign desk. We're putting up a different report that says the Pentagon said this think tank said. All these different generals and admirals have said. Meaning there is now this waking up to the fact that the Chinese are surpassing us in the Navy, in the military, on cyber capabilities, and they are spreading their influence globally in the African continent, in the South American continent, and here you see in the Middle East as well. They'll be there in Afghanistan to pick up the pieces. They'll be there in Iraq and Syria and Libya, and now obviously in the UAE, a very rich country that has begun doing business with Israel, and of course, vis-a-vis Israel, the United States has increased their cooperation with the UAE. And what do we notice there? Well, the Chinese are also beefing up their assets there. And the US intervened and they stopped construction at a port in Khalifa. Very, very, very important symbolic catch that the United States had. But again, the message here is wake up. We have to catch on to the Chinese, their agenda, not just in the Red Sea and in their area, but in spreading their influence globally as well.
There are reports that Iran's Revolutionary Guard seized a foreign ship in Gulf waters, Lisa, a ship they say is loaded with smuggled diesel. Now, has the ship been identified? And what do we know of the nationalities of the 11 crew who have been detained?
Yeah, this is a very, very interesting story because we see that a lot of these proxy wars that were going on in places like Libya or Syria, Iraq, for example, that were being funded by, let's say, Saudi Arabia versus Iran, or the Iranian regime fighting even the United States, are now going on in maritime efforts or capabilities. So we're seeing a lot of what's going on is the seizing of ships. You're hearing a lot of these stories where the Iranian regime is keeping an eye on the waters in order to seize, and the same thing's going on in the West. We're trying to seize the ships that are coming out this way. This time it was a ship that was carrying diesel fuel, and we'll have to keep an eye on what the details are that comes out of this story.
So I guess we don't know who they are, I guess the nationalities, or much about the ship at this point, right?
No, not yet.
Okay.
Keeping an eye on that.
Now, Lisa, 2 of the 17 North American hostages abducted by a Haitian gang in mid-October have been freed. Now, that's according to the church they were affiliated with. Apparently, they're safe and in good spirits, which is great news. Why the release, and what about the remaining hostages?
Yes. So this is a very interesting story. We've taken our eyes off of Haiti. The Haitian crisis was after the president was killed, and many, many gangs were taking over the area. This was a Christian group that was visiting, trying to spread, good feelings, good sentiments, and they were abducted by one of these gangs. 2 of these individuals were let go, according to the church, and they're doing well. They're in good spirits. They were treated, as well as can be for being abducted. And they say that the rest of the group is doing well also. We're hoping that the rest of the group gets off as well. This usually happens when gangs want to kind of show good behavior in order to get some sort of concession from someone or something from someone. So it might have been a local deal that was made, some sort of compromise that was made, and two were let go in good faith or in a symbolic exchange, and the rest hopefully will be let go very soon. But thank you for keeping an eye on this and covering it in your show, because I don't think many people are focusing on this story. We've forgotten about the 17, but again, they were there for a good reason, and we hope that their good deeds can pave the way to their full release.
Do we know what the demands are at this point? How much of a ransom are they asking for, the kidnappers?
No, not specifically, but this group actually does have a history of abducting individuals similar to this group, and of demanding either ransom or something from the local community. But right now, gangs have the upper hand in Haiti. There is a lot of anarchy going on. There is really an interim government that does not have much power, and the gangs are really ruling the streets.
Another story to definitely keep our eyes on. Our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, joining us once again from Los Angeles. Thanks so much, Lisa.
My pleasure.